I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We have a great show for you tonight on this Friday. We're going to be talking about why people run in dark clothes in the middle of the street. We'll also learn why warmer water affects the crabbing season, and we'll take a trip to Newport to talk about sea lions. But first, Oregon lost a newspaper today, and that is a big, big deal. In fact, it's our big story. If you want to know what's going on in your community, where can you turn? Well, if you're watching this show, it's likely you value in-depth information about what's happening in the Northwest, and we appreciate you being here. In the Portland area, we're lucky to have several good options for getting our news. We have strong local papers, TV stations, and radio stations. But that's not the case across the country. In fact, far from it. Take a look at this map. It's from the Northwestern University's Local News Initiative. It shows how many newspapers people have access to in any given area. The darker blue means more news. The lighter blue is only one newspaper. And the light green, no newspaper at all. Those are known as news deserts. If you have a newspaper in your town, you've probably noticed that the bundle being dropped on your doorstep is quite a bit thinner than 10 years ago. Producer Ashley Koch looked into what's going on as a major newspaper in Southern Oregon has closed down.
It's a pretty standard morning tradition. Start your day with a cup of coffee and the morning newspaper. But in more and more communities, those days are numbered. In some places, they're gone. In Medford, Oregon, a metropolitan area of more than 223,000 people, there hasn't been a newspaper to crack open for months. The Medford Mail Tribune stopped printing last year, and today is the last day for its online edition. Publisher Stephen Saslow announced that they're closing down all operations, saying the newspaper is unsustainable because of rising costs, shrinking ad revenue, and difficulty hiring staff. Bob Hunter was an editor at the Mail Tribune for 33 years.
The paper's been here for 110 years or more, maybe 120.
The Mail Tribune was the first Oregon newspaper to win a Pulitzer Prize back in 1934 for coverage of unscrupulous politicians in Jackson County. Hunter remembers a time, not long ago, when the newsroom was full of reporters.
We had at one point, 15 years ago, we probably had 55 people in the newsroom between the Mail Tribune and the Ashland Daily Tidings. And now I think the numbers, the Daily Tidings no longer exist. I think the numbers in the newsroom are probably in the teens.
We found that there have been closures here in Oregon of news outlets over a long period of time.
Regina Lawrence is the research director of the Agora Journalism Institute at the U of O. Last year, they mapped out where news outlets are located across the state.
Of course, the more populous areas of the state, the greater Portland area, the Bend area, some other areas like Eugene, et cetera, you can see that there's a pretty high concentration of news outlets for local news. But in the less populous areas of the state, those are also the areas where there's very few local news outlets.
Not having reliable, robust news outlets creates a wide ripple effect.
There'll be lots of things that slip through the cracks and that maybe don't get the attention they deserve. And I think that's a big loss for the community.
We know that there's a strong connection between the health of local news and the health of civic life in communities and the health of democracy itself. And so when local news starts to wither and decline, that can have real impacts on the accountability of politicians and political officials. It can have impacts on corporate behavior and corruption. And we know that it has impacts on voting patterns.
But there's more to it.
The relationships between people, the sense that people are members of a community, can be really affected when there's not strong local news organizations that are telling the stories of that community, that are being truly reflective of that community. Then that can really affect how connected people feel.
The research found that when people don't have access to quality, robust local journalism, they turn elsewhere for information about their community. To social media. Think about the rumors that spread on Nextdoor, or the misinformation posted on Facebook, or the toxic arguments on Twitter. Or people go to national news outlets, to cable shows, to podcasters and YouTube. But Lawrence's team found that when there are local journalists who live where you live, people tend to trust them more.
And we all know that there's this problem of media trust now in our society, but that problem is far less pronounced at the local level. Here in Oregon, it was a good solid 2/3 of Oregonians that we surveyed who said that they did trust their local news. They did trust their local news outlet.
But they can only trust the news if the news is actually there.
When there's less local news in the paper, then there's fewer people want to get the paper, and then it just feeds on itself and it continues on.
We ask people, if you don't trust your local news organization, why not tell us a little bit more about that? And quite often the comments were along the lines of the coverage is so thin compared to what it used to be. I don't feel like they really cover my local community.
So how can we fix this? A number of news publishers are working to keep the industry going, shifting to online news. Nonprofits like the Fund for Oregon Rural Journalism are working to preserve news outlets in rural areas. And now, a bill has been introduced into the Oregon legislature that would give you a tax credit for your local news subscription. Representative Ben Bowman is one of the co-sponsors.
You could basically take a tax credit, and at the end of the year, if you spent, let's say, $10 a month on a local newspaper subscription, you could subtract $120 a year from the taxes you owe that year.
There's also some action on the federal level. The Local Journalism Sustainability Act would also provide tax credits to support local news, but it hasn't made it out of committee in the last 2 years.
What people need to understand is the Medford Mail Tribune is not an outlier. It is part of a much larger trend. And if we don't take action to reverse the trend, we're going to have very few local news outlets left to hold government account. This is why I'm a Democrat. I'm a proud Democrat, but this is a bipartisan issue. If you care about local government accountability, if you care about transparency, if you care about having an informed electorate, you have to care about the health of local news.
In the meantime, in Medford, there are a couple of local TV stations, and people can get public radio, but no local daily newspaper.
My hope, and still maybe it's not a lost hope, is that something will step in and take its place.
Ashley Koch, KGW News.
Just up the road in Grants Pass, the newspaper there is trying to do what it can to step in and fill the void. The publishers of the Grants Pass Daily Courier posted a statement saying the Daily Courier is acting quickly to increase its investments in Jackson County so that we can ensure that the Courier can start reporting on more Medford area news within the next few weeks. And they're working on hiring the Mail Tribune's reporters. Writing today, the Daily Courier plans to announce the hiring of a Mail Tribune reporter early next week. Well, guys, you just did announce that. Anyway, the Courier also scheduled meetings with other Mail Tribune reporters in the coming days. Moving on, let's talk for a moment about our story last night on the shooting of Damon Coates. In case you missed that, it's okay. You could check out the entire story on our KGW YouTube page, and you should. We talked about Coates, who's a Clackamas County Sheriff's deputy, or was, and was shot in the face 20 years ago by a teen with mental illness. It's been an ongoing struggle for Damon and his family ever since. The story brought a range of reactions from some right here in our newsroom. Many of us worked with Damon before the shooting. Here's photographer Stephen Redlin.
Oh yeah, Damon was one of the good ones. As a public information officer for the Clackamas County Sheriff's Department, he would respond quickly. He would help me out at all different times, meeting me at restaurants on the way to and from an incident, help us out to get the information out there that would allow folks to be aware of and careful in any situation that occurred, good or bad. And he did it with the respect for the people he worked with and for us in the news media.
Damon, by the way, is still alive, although he's under hospice care now. But just in case you're watching Damon, I didn't want you to think this was some sort of a eulogy that we're doing. But there are a lot of people in our area still sending you warm thoughts. Here's retired Portland Police Commander Greg Hendricks.
So as a young detective in the mid to late 1980s, Damon, when I first met him, was a patrol officer, and later he was working narcotics. So the photo of him with the long hair holding onto the salmon is reminiscent of his time working narcotics at the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. He was this young, funny, gregarious, hardworking cop. The law enforcement community back in the 80s was pretty small. Everybody knew everybody, and he was just one of those guys that everybody just loved to be around.
Part of the reason we did this story was to remind you in our community that Damon and his wife Tammy are still there, still doing the best they can to get through every day. A shooting like this has impacts that are significant, though, and they go on and on and on. Here's our assignment desk manager, Shelley Swanke.
I remember working with Damon when he was the PIO for Clackamas County, and he was fabulous to work with. When the incident happened and the shooting, it stunned everybody. It brought us all to a screeching halt. The fact that he survived that and survived several other mishaps has been nothing short of a miracle. To see Damon and his wife Tammy again and to see their story and where they are is amazing, but it's also a reminder that what happened to him 20 years ago, there's still the problems that we're facing today.
That's the other reason I wanted to bring you Damon's story. It highlights the danger of some who have mental illness. Not all, in fact, most people who have mental illness are not dangerous. I get that. But in this case, there was a 15-year-old shooter who had mental illness, and he was very dangerous. His mom had tried to get him checked into a hospital on a psych hold the night before the shooting, but the local hospital said they couldn't do a psych hold, so the family took the 15-year-old home. In my opinion, we need a lot more professionals helping people and a lot more places for people to go during crisis. We also need to spend a lot more money for the entire field so that more professionals will get paid more under insurance plans. That'll attract more providers and make it easier for families to afford care. Todd wrote in to say, I agree that we should provide more services for the mentally ill. It's a moral issue, a quality of life issue, and a safety issue. Some of you are moved to tears by the struggle Damon and Tammy are living through. Marcel wrote in to say, thank you for bringing us the story on the real life impact the mental health crisis causes. I cried like a baby. DJ agreed, writing, I never cry. I am right now. Bless you for bringing us the update on Damon and his amazing wife. I have never forgotten him and that awful shooting. You are right, she goes on. We need to spend much more on mental health. It's much more important than the Rose Quarter redo. And we'll wrap up with a comment from Betty, who remembers Damon as well. She wrote, I had the pleasure to professionally come into contact with him from time to time before the shooting. I remember weeping and praying for him the day he was shot. What strength shown by them both. Thanks to everyone who wrote and called and talked to us on video with the Damon Coates story. In my opinion, this is a reminder that these things matter. Getting mental health illness under control, it's important to all of us. Those who are ill deserve to be helped, and those who are not deserve to be safe. I think there's a willingness by state leaders now to start moving toward a better future on this, but we should all pay close attention to that and encourage them to keep going. That's my opinion anyway. What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear from you. You can send an email to thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. Up next on The Story, we're talking wildlife. Oregon's delayed Dungeness crab season finally gets underway this weekend. Why crabbers were forced to wait weeks before catching any of the crustaceans. And then we're heading to Newport to check on some familiar friends.
You can hear the sea lions, and so people want to check it out. So it's very instrumental in the business on the bayfront.
One of their favorite spots to lounge and a great spot for tourists to see them, destroyed by a recent storm. The effort's underway to bring the sea lion docks back when The Story returns. Newport's Old Bayfront is famous for its sea lion docks that attract tourists by the thousands each year. But a winter storm last month destroyed the docks that the animals lounge on. If you've been there, you know that sound you were just hearing. The president of the Newport Sea Lion Foundation wants to raise $100,000 to replace those docks. And businesses that rely on that sea lion tourism hope to get the repairs done, at least some of them, before the Seafood and Wine Festival next month. Brian Clerkley went to Newport this week. He joins us with the story.
So this area right here, you'll see all of these pilings here. There were 6 large docks.
Janelle Goplin is the president of the Newport Sea Lion Foundation and the owner of Clearwater Restaurant, overlooking the docks where hundreds of sea lions would congregate. It's a huge tourist draw. Her customers get great views of the animals with their meal. Just last month, a massive windstorm broke the docks apart, some floating away, some were found and fished out of the water. Older, dilapidated ones had just been replaced with these in the spring. Now tourists can only see the sea lions from a distance.
We need to get them out of the water so that we can assess the damages and see if we really do need brand new docks or just repairs.
Goplin says the sea lion docks provide a free attraction for tourists, and it's been enjoyed for decades.
You can hear the sea lions, and so people want to check it out and spend time on the bayfront, come back to it, go to the shops. It's very instrumental in the business on the bayfront.
Bayscapes Gallery and Coffee House overlooks the docks as well. Owner Brendan Matthews says it's a way for tourists to see the animals in their natural environment.
There's so many things that the people coming here may turn around and invest in our local economy just after enjoying the sea lions as the draw. So I think it is very important to replace the docks.
Even on a rainy January day with broken docks and sea lions in the distance, tourists were still enjoying the views.
I think it started with the sound. We could hear it just while walking down the boardwalk, and we had to come check it out. And they're amazing.
Goplin hopes those tourists and others who love the animals will consider donating. Her goal is to raise up to $100,000.
And we hope that we have the money to finish it all before Seafood and Wine Festival, when hundreds of people, thousands of people, it's the biggest festival on the Oregon coast, come in February.
Bryant Clerkley, KGW News.
So the fundraising is starting a little bit slowly. They want to raise $100,000. So far, they have $4,000. If you'd like to help out, we have a link within this story on kgw.com. Moving from sea lions to crustaceans, if you've been waiting to get your hands on some fresh Oregon Dungeness crab, that wait may be coming to an end this weekend. State officials have finally given crabbers the go-ahead to start pulling those highly desired creatures from the Oregon waters starting Sunday. The season was delayed for weeks. Yet again, environmental reporter Cale Williams joins us to explain why.
The season is set to start this weekend, but that's after nearly 6 weeks of delays, due in part to biotoxins with links to climate change. And it hasn't just been this year. All but one of the last 8 crab seasons have been pushed back for one reason or another.
It was frustration, but it was frustration as you would for, a rain out at a ball game or whatever. It's that kind of, here we go again.
That's Tim Novotny, executive director of the Oregon Dungeness Crab Commission. He said delays are nothing new to Oregon's crabbing fleet. Oregon's Dungeness crab season was supposed to get underway December 1st, but like nearly every year for the past decade, it was pushed back. State regulators have strict standards that need to be met, both for the size of the crabs and for levels of a dangerous biotoxin called domoic acid.
The more recent years have been affected by climate change, ocean hypoxia, biotoxins, and other factors that are just becoming more common season to season.
That's Karen Braby. She's with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And she said, with the exception of last year, Oregon hasn't seen a crab season start on time since 2014.
Everyone wants to start on December 1st, but only if the crab are ready and only if they're safe to eat.
Francis Chan, a marine ecologist at Oregon State University, has been studying changes in the ocean for more than a decade. He explained that, as ocean temperatures have climbed because of climate change, researchers have seen links between warmer waters and the phytoplankton that produces domoic acid.
There's starting to be this emerging understanding that it's linked with certain kinds of ocean conditions. It seems to be linked with warmer water.
The toxin comes from algae blooms, which are eaten by clams, who are in turn eaten by crabs, and the acid builds up as it works its way up the food chain. Domoic acid doesn't hurt the shellfish, but it can cause nasty illnesses or even death in humans if it's consumed in high doses. That's why Novotny said most of the crabbers he's talked to understand the delay.
It's frustrating. You want to start December 1st. You want to get going. You want to get the crab to the market, but you don't want to do it at the sacrifice of quality.
It's hard to overstate just how important Dungeness crab are to the Oregon coast economy. Last year, the fleet brought in $90 million worth of crab, more than half the value of all the seafood caught in Oregon.
Without Dungeness crab, there really isn't another fishing activity that can fill that place.
I asked Novotny how the crabbing fleet had remained so resilient in the face of so many years of delays. He responded like a typical fisherman.
It's a secret. We're not telling anybody.
Now, all jokes aside, Novotny told me that the crabbing fleet is anxious to hit the water, but he said hungry Oregonians should maybe temper their appetites. The boats need to wait for decent weather to safely start fishing for crab, and they may not bring any in until they can agree on a price with processors. Cale Williams, KGW News.
Coming up next on The Story, it's no secret that it gets pretty dark early in the day now. We're all mostly used to it at this point. The sun rises just before 8, sets just before 5, but many with New Year's resolutions to get fit only have time to get out and exercise after it's already dark. But what they choose to wear while they're out and about has some people telling us it's driving them crazy. The dilemma of the invisible pedestrian when The Story returns. There are recurring segments here on KGW that air during other time slots and other shows throughout the day. One of them is called Driving Me Crazy. It's headed up by our own Chris McGinnis, and this week's topic is one that I think a lot of you can relate to, and you can bet I have my own opinions about this. Let's check out part of this week's Driving Me Crazy.
I realized it was kind of driving me crazy that
I absolutely hate that.
What drives them nuts? Kate from Portland fills us in. Why do grown adults think it's a good idea to run down the middle of the street in the dark wearing black from head to toe?
People in Portland just literally walk whenever they want.
It's terrifying. I don't want to get like go to jail for killing somebody.
Walkers and runners suited up for the cold and the rain, but not our long, dark Pacific Northwest winter nights.
I almost hit one of my neighbors who was wearing all black during a rainstorm, who was walking their dog.
Before we go too far down this road, the Portland Bureau of Transportation had this to say. Sounds like victim blaming. Through email, PBOT's Dylan Rivera added, most pedestrian fatalities happen when the pedestrian is crossing the street legally.
All right, let's talk about runners or walkers wearing all dark clothes during these long, dark winter evenings and nights. Here's my opinion on this. I've never really considered myself a runner, but I guess I am now. I run about 20 miles a week, more in the summer. And I have to say, when I run outside, if it's getting dark, which I do try to avoid, I run right in the middle of your street. Now, before you start booing, listen. It's important that runners pick quiet streets to run on, and it's dumb to wear dark clothes when you run or walk at night, so stop that if you're doing it. You're invisible, and you probably forget, and that rarely ends well. At least get a flashlight, but a reflective vest is even better. And if you want to know why runners end up in the street at night, here we go. It's a couple of reasons. First, the street lights are more likely to shine on the street, making it less likely you're going to trip on something. Also, the street is usually smoother than sidewalks, especially in Northeast Portland, where many have odd angles from roots and all kinds of things growing beneath and stuff on top of them, again eliminating a trip hazard. And there are people walking dogs on the sidewalk as well. At the same time, runners, you need to be aware. I always head for the sidewalk as soon as I know there's a car coming. So come on, people. Let's help each other out here. Drivers, please understand, we're not trying to offend you by running in the street. We're just trying not to trip. Be nice. And runners, nobody has bionic eyes. If you must run at night, don't wear black from head to toe. And if you do, remember that you're invisible. And drivers are not trying to kill you, they just can't see you. Well, that's just about what I think. How about you? Send me your thoughts. Email thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail. 503-226-5090. We're going to wrap things up right after this. That's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. And remember the story, our story, well, that never ends. Even though Monday's a holiday, by the way, Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, we'll still have a show for you. I hope you'll join us then. See you Monday.